All right. Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News, or bi-weekly, generally twice a week, editorial news show on Mint Press News, hosted by myself, Greg Stoker. So let's just jump right in. A lot of stuff happened over the weekend, and wow, isn't life incredibly exhausting? And look, if you loved 2024, you're gonna absolutely love 2025. So hello, everybody, and let's just get straight into it. A lot of stuff happened. All right. So, tonight on State of Play, Israel's security is falling apart as its far right wing government is resting its national security strategy entirely on the military. So, during the intro monologue, while everyone's filtering in, you know what? Let's just go ahead and do the plug. If you guys like this, and you like what Mint Press News does, we're a non-sponsored, non-corporate newsroom, tiny. And if you want to support the kind of watchdog journalism and commentary we do, consider checking us out on Patreon. Helps. $5 a month goes a long way. I don't run the Patreon. I don't even know if you get any benefits from it. You should, but again, that's not my lane. So you can check it out in the description. And anything helps. And of course, if you're getting nickeled and dimed by late stage finance capitalism and you can't swing it, like, share, and subscribe. It helps push this out into the algorithm and get exposed to more people. So thank you guys so much. We're just glad you're here. So plug over. One second. I just had to star a comment by Danet. We'll get to that later in the Q&A. Which is generally the last 10 minutes. If you're just finding this show for the first time, I'm exhausted. Sorry, I had this like energy drink thing here. Tastes like not natural stuff. Anyways, where we were talking about. Okay, yes, Israel's security is falling apart as its far-right government is resting its national security strategy entirely on the military. So common global security thought holds that a nation's defense strategy must be grounded in 4 pillars, okay? 4 pillars on which national security strategy rests on. This is pretty common. It's a common thought model. So 1 is statecraft and diplomacy. Diplomacy, getting along with your neighbors, exercising statecraft, creating strategic alliances is a really important part of national security. Israel's not really doing that. They're not really doing great diplomacy in West Asia right now. It's basically just like bomb and threaten. 2, military and intelligence. So deterrence through military capacity, deterrence through intelligence capacity, espionage, stuff like that. Obviously, Israel's main focus is going to be on military and intelligence. 3 is economy and society. We're going to talk about the Israeli economy and how it's not great. In fact, a publication came out today from a collegiate think tank saying that 70% of Israel's military spending, or 70% of the war, is supported by the United States. Because without our support, their GDP would have shrunken by 4.3% in the past year. And that's unsustainable. So they can't really be fighting this war without the United States support. And it's having massive economic repercussions. Not sure if we're going to get into that too much, but there's also, so 3 is economy and society. The society is having a lot of internecine issues. And then 4 is public diplomacy. So information, soft power, how people see Israel, that's taken a hit. So statecraft and diplomacy, military and intelligence, economy and society, and 4, public diplomacy. They're literally losing like in every aspect. So, and all they're doing is dropping bombs and fighting, and now they're establishing a distance conflict with Iran. So it's all on the military to resolve this crisis. The government is losing public trust. The economy is foundering. The obsession with intelligence-based decapitation strikes has not changed the strategic situation. Now, Israel has managed, through its reckless provocation of Iran, has now established a low-intensity distance conflict with the far larger nation. The military, Israel's main mechanism on statecraft in West Asia, is stumbling in Gaza, in Lebanon, a ceasefire would be beneficial for the state, but there is no viable diplomatic off-ramp for the far-right government in place. In fact, before we get into our first segment about BRICS, the BRICS summit last week, 3,000 veteran Israeli peace activists wrote an open letter and signed it, an open letter to the international community to apply actual sanctions to Israel. Quote, please, for our futures and the futures of all the residents of Israel and the region, save us from ourselves and use real pressure on Israel for an immediate ceasefire. Because they recognize, because they're not completely indoctrinated, being peace activists who live in Israel, that they're literally destroying themselves. So things aren't looking too hot for anyone on this planet right now, but stick around as we talk about Iran and the BRICS summit and foundering U.S.-Israeli policy tonight at 5 p.m. It's now 7.5 minutes past 5 on Mint Press News. I don't know why I wrote that into the show notes. That's weird. But anyways, let's start talking about Iran and the BRICS summit. And the reason we're going to talk about Iran within the context of the BRICS summit is that all these think tanks, all these Western publications are basically saying it's this weak post-revolutionary state. It's being, it's in an impossible military position. It's like, no, we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to do that. So now, Russian President Vladimir Putin closed the summit of the BRICS blocs of developing economies on last Thursday, praising its role as a counterbalance to what he calls the West's perverse methods, being inherently imperialist. So the 3-day summit, if you guys weren't tracking this story, I'm sure a lot of you were, it took place in the city of Kazan and was attended by leaders and representatives of over 36 countries. And that highlights the failure of U.S.-led efforts to isolate Russia over what's happening in Ukraine. The conflict came up repeatedly at the meeting. I mean, of course it would, which saw the first visit to Russia from United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres in more than 2 years and drew an angry reaction from Kyiv. So the UN Secretary General called for a just peace in Ukraine in line with the UN Charter, international law, and General Assembly resolutions. He also urged an immediate end to the fighting in Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan. Yeah, thanks, UN. Thanks for doing all you can to make sure that happens. So at a news conference last Thursday night, Putin was asked about the former U.S. President Donald Trump's promise to end the fighting in Ukraine. Russia has specifically pushed for the creation of a new payment system, and this is something that was rolled out that would offer an alternative to the global bank messaging network, SWIFT system, everyone's on it, and allow Moscow to dodge Western sanctions and trade with partners. And a lot of people are getting on board with BRICS because they've been watching the United States and the West punish all these different countries that don't step in line with them with economic sanctions. And because of the hegemony of the petrodollar and the SWIFT banking system and all these international institutions that were founded by the West, everybody needs an alternative. That's what a lot of countries are saying, and that's why there's a big push to enter BRICS in the first place, right? So China's President Xi Jinping has emphasized the bloc's role in ensuring global security. There's also a general belief that Western unipolarity doesn't actually keep the world safer. Xi noticed that China and Brazil have put forward a peace plan for Ukraine and sought to rally broader international support for it. Ukraine has rejected the proposal. So, I think he was quoted as saying, we should promote the de-escalation of the situation as soon as possible and pave the way for a political settlement. So a lot of interesting things happened. It was historic. Can't wait for a new multipolar world order. 2 criticisms. All right. My 2 main criticisms. So, which is not an indictment at all. It's just something to keep aware of, because we are still dealing, even though there's a drive for a multipolar world order, there's still great power politics involved, and everyone, is still responsible for, the statecraft and well-being of their own countries. So there's going to be some, clashing. And we're going to look at that because we're going to recognize it, because we have to be like, yes, this is not, a completely smooth machine, even though this was a historic meeting. So the last BRICS conference was about 14 months ago in South Africa. And since then, there's been an increase in the de-dollarization efforts and rhetoric. Russia hosted this one after being shut out of the SWIFT banking system, having what was it, $600 billion seized illegally by Western banks? I think it was something like that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I think it was about 600 billion. And not getting loans even from BRICS New Development Bank. It suffered sanctions. The main question going into it was, will Putin and his team be able to come up with a salient de-dollarization strategy? I'm not sure. I saw that there's been some criticism, whether that actually manifested. But then again, that's not really my wheelhouse. So we're going to skip over that to the Israeli genocide in Palestine. And so if you look at the Article 30 of the Kazan Declaration, which is what BRICS put out, I'm going to quote it because this is about the Palestine situation. We reiterate our grave concern at the deterioration of the situation and humanitarian crisis in occupied Palestinian territory, in particular the unprecedented escalation of violence in the Gaza Strip and in West Bank as a result of the Israeli military offensive, which led to mass killing and injury of civilians, forced displacement, and widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure. Again, this is from Article 30 of the Kazan Declaration, if you want to pull that up and follow along. So we acknowledge, and this is we acknowledge the provisional measures of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, in the legal proceedings instituted by South Africa against Israel. We reaffirm our support for the state of Palestine's full membership in the United Nations in the context of the unwavering commitment to the vision of a two-state solution based on international law, including relevant UNSC and UNGA resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative that includes the establishment of a sovereign, independent, and viable state of Palestine in line with internationally recognized borders of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side in peace and security with Israel. So, they condemned the violence in the declaration, and the declaration was really great on a number of different stances, and it's largely, again, historic, but it fell short of naming it a genocide, obviously for political reasons. So they can condemn it all they want, right? But 9 out of the 10 BRICS countries have very profitable relationships, like South Africa, number 1 coal exporter to Israel. China and India have companies that run the Haifa port. We could see them really put the nails to Israel if they wanted to, but there's always a distance between rhetoric and action. Because again, it's still great power politics. We can idolize BRICS all we want, but we still have to recognize it's still a political machine. That's just one caveat I wanted to put out there. Now, those are my main criticisms, but this conference was still undeniable historic dawn of a new era type thing. Will still take a long time to realize, but still can't overemphasize that point. Despite all the capitalist trolls lampooning the unveiling of BRICS currency, for example, the Financial Times just published an article, quote, Vladimir Putin's alternative to weaponized dollar fails to excite BRICS partners. Okay, so despite all this typical denigration by Western media, there is a tangible concern in that media. So for the first time, there is a serious economic competitor to the United States and its unipolar world order. And you can see that some people are finally starting to get concerned because of how the Western media is lampooning this effort to create a new currency and stuff. You can get a little sense of apprehension in the tone. So that doesn't mean BRICS doesn't have problems, though. But other observers retort that BRICS are themselves paralyzed by their own internal contradictions, with Russia, at war with Ukraine, while China and India have their own mutual squabbles. But and then the latest BRICS summit in Kazan was seen as an opportunity for Putin to demonstrate that he won't be isolated. It was successful. But then again, there's some beef between like Brazil and Caracas that, Venezuela got booted out by Brazil. And so look, there's going to be tensions. Obviously, they're completely different nations involved with their own geopolitical aims. So yeah, I think though it was still historic. It's not perfect, but yes, we all yearn for the destruction of empire. And I did want to give that short 10-minute thing about the BRICS conference, just my own personal take. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree, but I just wanted to bring that up because the most significant global flashpoint right now is sorry, I just got distracted by some of the comments, is Iran, right? That's the biggest flashpoint right now. So we're going to share screen. You know how much I love to talk about the Atlantic Council, right? Because I believe it's a cutout for Western intelligence, and it manufactures consent for war. And it's just been making a lot of bad calls. Like the Atlantic Council is a think tank, right, that has ties to the defense industrial complex and ties to three-letter agencies. And just like The Economist, they've been making a bunch of bad calls from the start. I think, yeah, they're one of these outlets. Like it's always like the ruble's about to collapse. Russia on the brink of revolution. It's just like, no, you guys haven't been right. Is the Atlantic Council the Jim Cramer of think tanks? All right. So let's just look at this article as a case study. So this is from October 22nd. This is at the start of, let me check the calendar. Okay, yeah. So this was like at the start of the BRICS summit. Yeah, so I guess what they're thinking, a crack in BRICS. Iran's economic challenges take center stage at Russian summit. So they make these assertions like Iran's economy is underperforming, and of its fellow BRICS members, it has one of the weakest economies. The chart below shows, okay, oil reserves. Just keep that in mind. There will always find investment. So this country's economy is expected to continue to struggle. We'll get to that. So they're asserting that there's some sort of weak link. There's some sort of weak link in the BRICS summit, even though they're, completely like the military power in the region. They're the one that can actually check Israeli impunity. Iran is absolutely vital strategically for China's Belt and Road Initiative. They have a deepening security relationship with Russia. So I don't really even they've been more embedded in. There's a reason they were invited, and there's a reason they accepted the BRICS. Because Iran, they're not wrong in this article that says when they say Iran will likely use the BRICS summit as an opportunity to pursue more trade and financial partnerships with its allies as a part of the country's look to the East policy. Yeah, no, duh. That's why they're doing BRICS. One of the reasons it's because they need to get rid of stop being threatened by Western sanctions. But to say that just because they're struggling under sanctions doesn't mean it's a crack in BRICS. Everybody wants Iran on the table. Again, Belt and Road Initiative, deepening security relationship with Russia. They're seen as a front of resistance against imperialism in West Asia. So despite what people think about the government itself, I think this article is a huge whiff of a take by the Atlantic Council. But thanks so much, guys. So I just wanted to use that as a case study for a lot of what the rhetoric coming from Western media is, and it always has been about Iran. We did an episode 2 weeks ago about the rhetoric surrounding Iran. It doesn't make any sense because it's at one time this post-revolutionary state with failing currency, undisciplined military, about to absolutely implode in sectarian violence. But at the same time, it creates this octopus of terror. That's That's what the Hebrew media calls it, where it has all these proxies. It can destabilize the entire Middle East, and according to Vice President Harris, it's the biggest existential threat to America. No, sorry, it's our greatest adversary. How? It's a regional power. It's not. It doesn't have global power projection across the Atlantic Ocean. So the rhetoric itself is something we have to get used to. It makes no sense. How can you be about to fall as a post-revolutionary regime, but also be the biggest adversary to the United States of America, which is the most powerful empire in decline, the most powerful empire in human history? It really makes no sense. The octopus, wait, the octopus of terror also sounds like a terrible sex toy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've never thought about it that way. Thank you for that image. I don't think I'll ever be able to not imagine that going forward, but we will just kind of move on. So turning back to actually Iran and Israel, and I just wanted to bring BRICS in because everyone's acting like Iran's kind of like standing alone. It's like, no, they have a lot of backing. Okay. The Western media is trying to portray a country that's completely isolated. But yeah, it's just not. It's a crap narrative. We're going to move on. So basically, Tehran may decide, like, here's the question. We're going to talk about the strikes on military bases here in a second, but let's talk about will they respond first and what actually did happen. Well, at first, when the Israeli attack happened, a couple of things went down, and we don't have any B-roll for the Iranian attack right now, but we do have random B-roll of Israel's BS that they're doing in West Bank. So if you need something to distract yourself while I go on a tangent, let's get that up there. All right, so there was not a lot of video evidence of the Iranian attack. First, we thought it was Israel like shooting UAVs or something, like based off of image intelligence we had coming out through Telegram channels. It was very clearly there was no ballistic missiles being used. So we saw air defense systems activated. Like maybe there was UAVs, maybe they were targeting fighter craft. I'm not really sure because it looked like the Israelis used F-35s. And those are supposed to be like pseudo stealth bombers. So we don't know how effectively they were picked up. But we did expect that fighter craft were going to be used because Israel has a very small ballistic missile arsenal compared to Iran. And they want to not use their ballistic missiles unless they absolutely have to for deterrence. Once they're out of them, they're out of them. So yeah, I guess. And then we also saw like 5 to 10 Stratotankers fly from Europe towards Israeli airspace, and then they turned off their transponders. Now this kind of like hinted that they were going to do a strike because it's, if you look at the map, it's pulled up right there. You have to cross Jordan, Iraqi airspace. And, these aren't commercial liners. These aren't commercial aircraft. They're fighter jets. They have small tanks and they use a lot of fuel. So based off the unclassed range for like F-35s is like you can get to Israel, or sorry, you can get from Israel to Iran to hit some targets in Western Iran. However, you're not going to have enough fuel to fly back. So you're probably going to have to refuel over Iraqi airspace. So they didn't go through Turkish airspace. They didn't go around. So it must have been through Iraqi airspace. That's what we're thinking. Also, they did strike targets in Iraq and Syria. We know for a fact that they did hit some Iranian early warning radar systems in Syria. Obviously, giving the game away, but they want to hit those early warning sites. Yeah. Okay, so Iran claims all the ALBMs, okay, ballistic missiles, were launched from outside Iranian airspace. Yeah. Wait, sorry, I think I'm getting trolled. Okay. Oh, sorry, we got a troll in the comments. I think I've blocked her before. If you were actual intelligence in Afghanistan, Greg, there's no effing way you're not taking into account actual ops. I'm not really sure what that means. But anyways, we're gonna keep moving on. So they definitely hit some bases. Well, we think so. The damage was absolutely minimal. Okay, so we have satellite image intelligence. This comes from like an open source intelligence resource called, what is it called? Um, I think Planet Labs. Okay, let me pull it up real quick, y'all. So it's really nothing to write home about. Hang on, my computer's lagging. Okay, here. Sorry, guys. Just friggin' open it up. Dude, I need to get something other than a MacBook Air because this is getting crazy. Share screen. Okay, here we go. All right. So let's go ahead and make this the biggest focus on the screen, this map. Okay, so first of all, we've got these photos that were presented by the Associated Press, right? You've got a couple bases that were hit. Some buildings damaged sat in Iran's Parchin military base, where the International Atomic Energy Agency suspects Iran in the past conducted high tests of high explosives that could trigger a nuclear weapon. Khojir military base, which analysts believe hides underground tunnel systems and missile production sites. All right, well, let's see. This is what the AP is. Oh God, there's Harris right there. Hang on, let me exit out of that ad. Okay. Now, if we zoom in, all right, now based off of image intelligence, it doesn't look like there's a lot of damage. Plus, this is a pretty grainy photo. This is what happens when you don't have access to the military grade Google Earth, which is what we used to use. And then the image quality is insane. But based off of this, it looks like maybe like this building was hit, maybe this one, but it's hard to get a sense of like what was hit or the scale of the damage. So okay, cool, I guess. And then they're asserting that this other military base, okay, this is a better image, right? And they said damage was done. I've gone through it. I can't really see what they're citing. Of course, they don't have graphics to actually show the average lay citizen what they're looking for in terms of battle damage. I can't really see anything. Maybe there's something right here if you see where the mouse is going, but I don't know. I don't know what kind of significant damage they thought they were doing. They're not pointing out any blast craters. I'm just kind of like, what are you guys talking about? Now, we know some people died. I think it was like 4 who were a part of an early warning system or an air defense system that they targeted. But I think a lot of their ordnance was shot down if they were using missiles. And it doesn't look like anything was bombed heavily, not at least not based off of this testament by the Associated Press. I'm just not seeing anything. Like, what do you guys think in the comments? Iran also claimed they had set up dummy targets, but I'm not sure those would show up on satellite images. Your recon/intelligence sucks. Thanks, y'all. I'm just looking at the photos that the AP put out. So the bottom line is, what is the aftermath of this attack, right? So Tehran may decide against forcefully retaliating directly for now. This is what some people are saying, not least because doing so might reveal its weaknesses and invite a more potent Israeli response, analysts say. Analysts, according to Reuters, this is a completely wild take. They're quoting Sanam Vakil, the director of the Middle East and North Africa program at the London-based think tank Chatham House. Quote, Iran will play down the impact of the strikes, which are in fact quite serious, unquote. she says Iran is boxed in militarily and economic constraints and the uncertainty caused by the U.S. election and its impact on American policy in the region. Even while the Mideast wars rage, Iran's reformist president, Masoud Pezeshkian, has been signaling his nation wants a new nuclear deal with the U.S. and to ease crushing international sanctions. That's true. I'm not going to like argue with that. Of course, who wouldn't want a sanction relief? However, the question is, why would they do that? Um, they can no longer afford to exercise strategic patience anymore. They can't be seen to back down and lose. Oh, we can put the B-roll back up. Oh, Greg is. Oh, see, you're back. I don't know how. I thought you just got blocked. Anyways, now they hate on reforms. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, these I'm not sure what they're trying to. It's just the same old rhetoric, you know. Iran is this post-revolutionary state, and they can't do anything. They're boxed in militarily. I don't know how they're boxed in militarily. They're not. They can't. It's a distance conflict, which means that neither country is in a position to invade the other one. They don't have the capabilities to invade each other's countries. So it's going to be a distance conflict, which means rockets get shot from Iran, bombing sorties happen from Israel. So what do you mean they're boxed in militarily, Chatham House? Like, what? They're just going to keep shooting. And then relying on Russian air defense systems and deepening their security relationships with Russia and then probably China eventually. And they don't have to do anything. If anyone's boxed in militarily, it's Israel. Like, what? How is that even a contention? How can you say Iran's boxed in militarily and not Israel, who's fighting a losing action in Gaza? Who's having escalating violence in West Bank because of their brutal occupation, and now is saying that they're going to have to draw down, potentially end their ground operation in Lebanon here shortly because they've taken so many casualties. Like, how do they win? How do they reestablish deterrence capacity? What? Like, this is the most bizarre take I've heard. Boxed in militarily. Economic constraints. They've weathered the sanctions. Their economy is on an upswing, even though, you know, some people are saying it's not doing too well right now, but they've survived the sanctions. Sanctions do not work. They do not work in Iran. They're meant to punish the civilian population into creating such unrest against the government that they install a different government after a coup that's more friendly to the United States. That's the purpose of U.S. sanctions, all right? And they haven't worked. So it's the most bizarre take. I don't get it, but here's the main thing, and here's the about Iran. Are they? It seems like they're locked into a. I wouldn't call it a tit for tat, but they're locked into a tag you're it situation now. They exercised strategic patience for as long as they could. You know, the embassy in Damascus, I think it was in April, got blown up. They had a very measured response. You know, Israel kept hitting them. They hit back. They had Operation True Promise, like 2, maybe Operation True Promise 3. And I'd say, yeah, sorry, 1 second. Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the F-35s, but we'll pin that. Alistair Crook on Judge Napoleano's channel said, admittedly, I mean, I don't know if it's the right way. I mean, he's got a lot of leftist policies, but Israeli F-35s encountered new air defense radar, presumably delivered by Russia, that could recognize F-35s despite stealth, force the F-35s to send their air-launched, that's air-launched ballistic missiles, guys, from distance because they couldn't safely enter Iranian airspace. Yeah, that's possible. But then again, here's my thing, and this is what I talked about on Al Jazeera. The United States has a pretty good idea of Russian capabilities because, we've been helping in Ukraine. We've been helping Ukraine try and successfully penetrate Russian air defense systems and electronic warfare countermeasures. So, and the United States shares literally everything with Israel. So, unless it's something that they've never used before or never used against F-35s before, I don't know. It seems kind of like a stretch that they would know about it. But again, this is something we're not going to know right now. But then again, because again, America shares everything with Israel. All the Russian capabilities from their intelligence collection, the NATO intelligence collection in Ukraine, and they've seen Ukrainian F-35s, F-16s get identified by these early warning systems. And admittedly, they're different fighter craft, but I do think it's very important to realize that I will concede that Israel did not want to have any embarrassment of this. The last thing they needed was a fighter craft shot down. So they're probably like, when planning these operations, there's different types of like compromise. Like, are you soft compromised? Are you hard compromised? And if you're soft compromised, you go to like a plan B. So instead of going into Iranian airspace with our pseudo stealth craft, we're just going to shoot ALBMs, air launched ballistic missiles. So that could be something if they were getting radar pings and they knew that they were being picked up by early warning systems. That does track. But now let's talk about they're going to respond now. It might be after the election. But Iran's locked in. We've seen the Israeli reprisal. It was unimpressive, based strictly. I mean, of course, the Iranian government's playing it down, and they've made some stronger statements now, but based off of all the image intelligence I've seen, it doesn't look significant. If it was significant because they were hitting like secret bases out in the high desert, well, we're not going to see it. So just based off of that, they didn't hit Tehran. We saw the air defense systems in Tehran get activated. So yeah, yeah. So I keep getting distracted by the comments. I'll get to these here at the live Q&A, but what are they going to keep doing? The Cradle Media coined the term "boiling the Israeli frog," and they really don't have to do anything. All they have to do is make another strike, eventually, continue to put rounds on military targets, demoralize the Israeli population, and they seem pretty secure with their air defense systems. Israel is not willing, and by extension, the United States is not willing to target nuclear sites because it won't work. And they're not willing to target oil sites because Iran could destroy United States oil assets in the region, as we've mentioned a zillion times. So they limited it to military targets. And based off everything we've seen, it was a big whiff, and it really didn't accomplish much at all. So, yeah, I think we're just going to keep seeing their security situation completely degrade, because there will be no ceasefire until there will be no ceasefire with Iran, between Iran and Israel now, until there's one in Gaza. Having a ceasefire in Gaza and a withdrawal from the Gazan Strip is the only way to end the violence with Iran, and it's the only way to end the violence with Hezbollah. Anything less is not gonna get it done. So Iran can't back down now because their strategic standing in the region's challenged. And then the West and Israel cannot back down, and they cannot be seen to have lost to Iran. So when, what was it, last week when I said like we're further away from a ceasefire than we've ever been, it kind of looks like that is unfortunately true. No one cares about getting a ceasefire before the election. After the election, why would Trump or Harris care about getting a ceasefire? The only ceasefire that Trump would ever push for would be a ceasefire in Ukraine, potentially. And then this violence will keep rolling on, and there's no breaks. There is only one break. There's only one break, and it is something we're going to talk about here in a minute. But when asked, if there's any checks going to be put on Israel, no. And there's going to be no attempt to have Israel save itself from itself. We just talked about those activists with the open letter to the international community to please save our country, put sanctions on, because that's the only way it's going to stop. Israel's going to stop destroying itself.
Israel launched an attack on Iran that has raised fears of a widening conflict in the Middle East. What is your message to Iran?
Well, first of all, do not respond. It would be a mistake. And we are prepared to defend Israel as we have before. We will again. But the critical point is that there must be a de-escalation in the region. And we are working through diplomatic channels and other channels to ensure that there is a de-escalation in the region.
Is there any indication based on the intelligence that you've seen that Iran wants to respond?
I can't speak to that, but we've been very clear as the United States that they should not respond and that it would be a mistake.
What are the consequences if they do?
I'll keep you posted.
So we've talked about how Israel is incapable of diplomacy, but it seems like the United States is incapable of any sort of sophisticated diplomacy at this point. You see they're burning all of our soft power. We're burning all of our soft power, the ability to co-opt rather to coerce, to inspire people rather than to force them to do what we want. That's gone. The United States has been incapable of managing a ceasefire. They're incapable of any sophisticated sort of diplomacy. And the imperialists in Washington and its vassal states in the West will not back down. They cannot afford to back down in Ukraine, and they cannot afford to back down in Israel. So this will keep going, and we'll continue to lose soft power. And we're not really capable of any sort of sophisticated diplomacy in this late stage empire. Look at General Petraeus, one of the overlords of the Iraq War, talk about what plans they have for Gaza. And I'll do some commentating on it here in a second, but check this out.
There should be a vision for the future of the Palestinian people that is similar to the vision that we presented to the people of Iraq before we conducted the major operations that we did there during the surge. And we would go to the people of Fallujah and we would tell them in advance of our operation, we are going to make your lives better. We're going to do it by getting Al-Qaeda out of your neighborhoods.
Al-Qaeda was never in Iraq before the U.S. invaded.
And then we're going to stay in those neighborhoods. We're going to create gated communities, essentially.
Biometric concentration camps.
It's an accurate description, but with much more effective walls. In fact, we would tell them, I said, look, it costs a lot of money to be in a gated community in Florida, and we're going to give it to you for free here in Fallujah.
That's an insane thing to say. So biometric concentration camps. So just rebrand them as gated ghettos in Gaza. And again, we're not doing anything. Our policymakers, all these ex-generals who now are fellows at think tanks, no one really knows what that really means. And we're not stopping them. And they're losing militarily. And the only thing they can do is military action. So this is going to end sometime, but not yet. And none of the people who support Israel seem to have the capacity or the foresight to get them to say, hey, stop. Your long-term existential survival is at risk. Former General Petraeus is literally yes, let's do concentration camps. I'm sure that will really help Israel's image and long-term sustainability. I'm sure that will definitely bring across the ceasefire. And he's trying to do like operations, or he's setting a plan that was meant for the United States military. And whatever you think of that, it's a more competent military than the Israeli Defense Force, which is a largely conscript effort. So you're going to recommend they do a plan that was meant for professional U.S. forces to the IDF? That's a huge problem. So, oh, my microphone almost fell off my desk. Look at that. All right, guys. Well, let's see. So at the end of the day, we could stop. We could stop them. Everybody knows we can stop them. But just in case you guys haven't seen this yet, I'm not going to bring up the actual paper, but why do I keep getting ads from these Israeli sites? Okay, here we go. Pulling it up. Let's do it. And window. Like, we have all the leverage we need to stop it. And this just shows you how, Nasrallah was right when he said they're as weak as a spider's web. A report by Brown University's Watson Institute reveals that since the beginning of the war, the U.S. has spent more than $22 billion on military aid to Israel. 70% of Israel's war costs. They've only been fighting for a year. So one of the great figures that came out in this report, scanning, one of the paper's mission statements says that it has been difficult for the U.S. public, journalists, and members of Congress to get an accurate understanding of the amount of military equipment and financial assistance that the U.S. government has provided to Israel's military during the past year of war. There is likewise little U.S. public awareness of the cost of the United States military's own related operations in the region, particularly around Yemen. So I think of the aid package we sent to Israel, about $4 to $5 billion was actually on U.S. fleet actions against the Houthi, but so that's part of the aid actions as well. So, yeah, and so at the same time, calls are being heard in Israel to shut down the UNRWA refugee agency, which they've done. So apparently UNRWA is now completely shut down, and yeah, so 70% of the war effort. Which means, and here's the figure, there is no doubt that without American assistance, the government deficit for 2024-2025, one of the highest in the country's history, would be about 4.3% more of the GDP, an unimaginable amount. Therefore, it is doubtful that the war would have been conducted in its current intensity or scope without U.S. assistance. And yeah, it's just... Yeah, it's insane. So, yeah, I guess it's super ironic. Oh, also, look, Ben Gurion Airport's Terminal 1 closes its door to international flights for 5 months. The terminal, which briefly opened 7 months after the war's start, anticipating an influx in tourism, is closing due to a decrease in passenger traffic. Look, there's so many ways that this thing's hurting this state. And I think the bitter irony is, by unconditionally supporting Israel, the United States is destroying it. It's like, giving hardcore drugs to an addict that just can't stop, except instead of drugs, they're addicted to killing and ethnically cleansing and taking land, but they're destroying themselves in the process. I'm not sure if that was the cleanest analogy, but I think that's the most prescient one based off of what Israel's security situation is. It's crumbling and they're destroying themselves. And yeah. And now they're in a distance war with Iran, and that's going to not be to Israel or the United States' advantage. Okay, well, let's get some questions going. First of all, why are Americans so openly evil, and what can be done about it? Let me think. I mean, most people are generally not evil. I think the evil that is in American society is like the evil of capitalism and the indifference that it breeds. Also, white supremacy too. Um, yeah, it's just what we've been taught. Most Americans are indifferent. They're just indifferent. That's why um, a lot of the Harris supporters are trying to vote shame everybody who's not okay with genocide, with cop cities, with fracking, with ecological catastrophe, with militarized border police. Um, and the only thing they want are their personal. They only care about issues when it directly impacts them, and yeah, they're indifferent to everything else. And they've been taught. Americans have been taught for years. The post 9/11 stuff. There's the Islamophobia, but it's also we've been taught culturally that that's the West Asia. Or sorry, no, they use the Middle East. They've been fighting for thousands of years, and they're going to keep fighting for thousands of years, and there's nothing that you can do about it. It's the Middle East. It's complicated. So I think the main evil is the indifference of the sociocultural fabric, and also, of course, capitalism, which is imperialism, which is colonialism, which ends in genocide. So, yeah, that was kind of a roundabout answer, but yeah, it's mostly indifferent. And then Americans are really scared right now, and it makes them more indifferent and actually angry at the Palestinians for being genocided, because now Trump could be president again, and he probably will be. Hey, brother, I'm a former Vietnam vet and not a proud one either. Welcome to the club. I guess coming from the military, fam, 7 and all, I was raised to believe in our armed forces. Pop was a Korean vet. Yeah, I think the last just war we had was Vietnam. Korea was not great. It was also an exercise in imperialism. But my grandfather, he fought in the Korean War too. He was an artillery officer at the time. Came from a military family too. The indoctrination takes a long time to unlearn. How's the new media company coming along with Butch Ware? So excited for that. I honestly don't know much about it. I might have a show on it. But beyond that, I don't really have any details. I'm going on vacation this week, and I'll learn more when I get back. Well, I'm not going on vacation. I'm like disappearing into the desert for like 7 days for my own mental health. And then I'll be back November 6th to talk a lot of trash about the presidential election. So these are all wars against BRICS, Project Ukraine, Gaza and Lebanon extermination camps, Iran. We're trying to get a lot of oil. Yeah, I mean, isolating China, isolating Russia, isolating Iran. That's what the United States does. It uses its power projection, both militarily, economically, and politically, to isolate countries from one another. It's just not working like it used to. And one of the reasons why it doesn't work like it used to is because we don't have the same power projection that we had in the 90s. And sanctions don't work. So, yeah. It's a dying empire. Like, America is still going to be powerful for a very long time. It's not going anywhere. But we are like watching the beginning of the end. It's not going to take hundreds of years like the Roman Empire took to decline. It's going to happen a lot faster, but it's still not going to happen overnight, y'all. I think America wants socialism to fail everywhere else except Israeli utopia settlements, aka. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the struggle between like communism and capitalism and socialism, right? Capitalism wants everything else to be, a capitalist society, so you can exploit it and extract it, and everyone else wants to be communist, because if there's one imperialist society, then the entire project's in danger. So yeah, so I don't know, to come back to it, I do think, yes, they want socialism to fail everywhere, because socialism is a threat to capitalism. And the political and economic elite in this country don't want any threat to their pocketbooks. Didn't Ayn Rand collect Social Security checks, or was she on welfare when she expired? I mean, I think as a novelist, she wasn't that wealthy. I'm not sure who her husband was, but I bet she would collect those checks. Yeah. You spoke the other day about people joining forces is considerably down. The same is happening here in Australia. No one wants anything to do with their bullshit. First of all, the benefits aren't as good as they used to be. You know, free college, great. I'm gonna have like a master's degree and then work a job where I get paid 24 hours a day, $24 an hour. Nope. And also, they watched 20 years of millennials and Gen Xers kill themselves and commit suicide. So they're like, maybe not. So yes, it's not just recruitment. Recruitment's down across the board. It's also retention. So retaining people who have a lot of skills, you know, instead of doing it another 5 years, they'll just get out. So do you think Iran is going to strike in response? Yes, but they're going to take their time about it. I would guess they're not. It's not going to be immediate, and it's still going to be measured. You know, it's just going to be another love tap, you know, or hate tap. You know, go away tap. It's not going to be crazy. I mean, they say it's going to be overwhelming, but it might be spectacular. But I don't think it's going to be overwhelming. They're still trying to do escalation management. So, Israel banned UNRWA completely. Is the UN going to allow that? I don't think they have any say in the matter. But then again, I'm not a UN legal expert. What the news I've been seeing is, yes, they voted to ban UNRWA completely. Why doesn't mainstream media ever talk about Leahy laws? And if those are the laws that state that if America is sending weapons to a country involved in human rights violations during war, can't send those weapons anymore. Well, because we're in violation of our own laws, and the mainstream media is trying to provide political cover for Israel to continue the genocide. So, yeah, they don't mention the Leahy laws. So, how much does it cost them in the Red Sea against Ansar Allah? Based off the report, maybe about $4 billion. That's what the report was asserting. I haven't read the entire thing. I skimmed certain passages, but yeah, we're thinking about $4 to $5 billion. Oh, Gaza is just a gated community. Yeah, it's not actually an open air concentration camp. It's just like rebrand the Warsaw Ghetto into like the Warsaw gated, you know, community. Warsaw Meadows, you know. Yeah. Plus, also, I hate gated communities. Like the last time I lived in one, it was so weird. I freaking. Anyways, that's beyond the scope of this. But if the B-22 has no stealth, it is kind of a dud. Is a $2 billion bomber will get shot down? You might as well have a B-52 that costs less. And then finally, the Vietnam, the last just war. Nope, Vietnam was not a just war at all. Korea wasn't either. The last one that you could have had pretended. Look, Imperial Japan and the Nazis and Mussolini's government and Franco in Spain was bad, y'all. So that was a good thing that happened, that they no longer exist. But yeah. And this is certainly not a just war. And because of its injustice, Israel is becoming a pariah state. They're destroying themselves. And because all the Zionists and the bought and paid for politicians in Washington aren't really interested in saving it, they think they're saving it, but they're idiots. They're literally idiots. Brian Mast, who the congressman from Florida who supports Florida Israel unconditionally, he doesn't even know what BRICS is. So they're idiots. And because of their bad legislation, they're going to let Israel destroy itself. So, yeah, Hiroshima and Nagasaki in themselves were some of the worst crimes in human history. This was at the ends of World War II. We knew Imperial Japan was on the brink of surrender, but there's the overwhelming consensus that the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not to get the Japanese to surrender, but because we wanted to show the Russians that we weren't effing around. And to scare the crap out of the USSR. That's why. to show the Russians what we would be willing to do. It was like an exercise of will, because we knew we were going to start fighting the Russians, when we were still fighting the Second World War. So, yeah, guys, I think that's the roll up. We do think Israel's propped up by U.S. money, and even U.S. money can't save it. And Israel has dropped the equivalent of 7 to 8 nuclear bombs in this Gaza war. And so the crimes are unbelievable. And the one consolation is that they are destroying themselves, and that all of our horrible politicians are helping that regime do it. So, yep, there's no way out of this. We may have a Wednesday episode, maybe not, but I'll definitely be back next Wednesday to do the election. So it's either going to be Harris or it's going to be Trump. I'm thinking it's Trump, but a lot can happen in a week. We'll see. She's run one of the worst campaigns. I think it's going to be, she's going to pull a Hillary Clinton 2016, and we're going to be stuck with a fascist orange blob. Yeah, but hey, we're all in it together. So it's going to get worse before it gets worse, guys. But at least everyone's learning about how these things work. So we will see you on the next one. Cheers, y'all. And let's look to those elections. All right.